Next item is a submission by councillor members, and it's guaranteed livable basic income by Deputy Mayor Mackenzie.
Deputy, over to you for an intro to this one.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I'll read my motion, and if I get a seconder, instead of going to the background, we have online with us Will Robertson from Carleton University, who's an expert in this field, and he's presented both to Moncton Council and Fredericton. So I will allow him to come forward and do a little background and answer any questions that you may have. Welcome, Will. Thank you. Whereas the growing social crisis and impacts of poverty have downstream effects on our municipality, putting unsustainable pressure on our limited resources to deliver necessary public services and social infrastructure supports as we struggle to keep up with the evolving needs of our community. And whereas basic income addresses key social determinants of health, such as income and housing, it can alleviate pressures on municipalities to address poverty and fill gaps in social supports such as shelter, housing, food security, and mental health. Research and pilots show that when people have a sufficient and secure income, their mental and physical health improves. They have the capacity to secure more affordable, suitable, and safe housing, childcare, healthy food, and transportation, and poverty rates decrease. Whereas the provision of a guaranteed livable basic income would benefit individuals, families, communities, and protect the most vulnerable in society, it would also support community resilience by facilitating the transition to a local economy that responds to the climate crisis and other major challenges. Evidence shows that a federally funded basic income that improves people's financial stability is possible, as successful income transfer programs already exist in Canada for seniors, old age security and guaranteed income supplement, and for parents, the Canada's Child Benefit. Therefore, be it resolved that the Council of the City of St. John directs the Office of the Mayor to write a letter to the Prime Minister, New Brunswick members of Parliament, and the Senate, the Premier of New Brunswick, and members of the Legislative Assembly of New Brunswick, and the Fundy Regional Service Commission, calling on these orders of government to work towards implementing a guaranteed livable basic income to eradicate poverty and homelessness and ensure everyone has sufficient income to meet their basic needs. So if I get a seconder, David? Okay, well, could you take it from there and give us an idea as to why this is a good idea?
Sure thing. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, and thank you, Your Worship, and members of Council for allowing me to come and speak to you this evening. I am a Monctonian, born and raised, and grew up there for the first 18 years of my life, and have experienced and seen the impacts of poverty as it's grown in my hometown, but also I did my undergrad at St. Thomas University in Fredericton, New Brunswick, where I saw a similar thing that all of us are facing in the province of New Brunswick and in our cities across the country. And so basic income resolutions, to give some context to Council, have been passed in Fredericton, in Moncton, Halifax, the City of St. John's, and are also being considered in Pictou County in Nova Scotia and in Yarmouth. The motion before you was also passed by a resolution at the Union of BC Municipalities. So this is not just a regional issue, this is right across the country where these discussions are being had. I will also say to the jurisdictional point that MP Jenica Atwin in the case of Fredericton, and also Wayne Long, of course, in the City of St. John, is supportive of a basic income and has spoken to such effect publicly previously. So just to speak to the kind of jurisdictional concerns some may have. The motion before you is recognizing the reality of the situation we see before us in the province of New Brunswick, but of course in the City of St. John. And what we're asking is that we're calling on higher orders of government to work together to implement a guaranteed livable basic income. So to be clear, not a universal basic income. This doesn't go to everyone and anyone without any strings attached, to a certain level of a market-based measure of poverty. And I'm happy to answer any questions on that in particular, but that's what we mean when we say a guaranteed livable basic income. This has been worked on currently in Prince Edward Island, where a motion was supported unanimously by the PEI legislature to work to implement a basic income in that province. That work is ongoing. Newfoundland and Labrador introduced a basic income in this type of model for youth exiting care. That was announced just a month or so ago. And they have an all-party committee in Newfoundland and Labrador that's working to this end to implement basic income as well. And they've met twice now. So it's a regional discussion, a provincial discussion, and also one that all of our cities are facing the brunt of poverty. And so a guaranteed livable basic income could have huge positive impacts for not only those residents of St. John, Fredericton, and Moncton, but of course for all New Brunswickers and everyone facing the strife of poverty. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. I hope Council has had some time to review some of the background material provided to you along with this motion. And I'm happy to answer any and all concerns or questions you may have on the matter. Thank you.
Okay, that's great. I do have a quick question here, I think, from Councillor Ogden, so I'm going to pass the speaker over to him.
Thank you, Professor, for doing this. It is a national problem. I just want to put something in context about St. John. About 35 years ago, I started organizing food bank drives for about 35 years. And the first 10 years, I didn't realize that it was so connected to purchasing power. And if you look at our incomes in the last 40 years, they do not sustain the purchasing power they need, which creates tent cities to shelters. And we're just seeing a proliferation of them. We now have 16 food banks. I think when we started, we had 1 or 2. So this has been going on for a long time. And I commend you on that, and it is a national issue. On the local issue, we lost a lot of federal and provincial tax dollars through legislation created in the mid-60s, and also because of the loss of major federal funding for some things in our area. So that has created even more poverty in St. John than Fredericton or Moncton, where incomes are higher. And we also have another local issue that we're working on, is to raise our level of education, which is lower than the other level cities in Atlantic Canada. So that, like, we have poverty on 2 levels here. One is a local and one is a national. But I want to commend you for this and making the point, because one thing that people say is when you say you're raising income, people, especially in small business, are saying we can't afford this, but poverty costs our economy and our society a lot of money. And what we spend on policing, social work, teaching, and we're seeing a proliferation of tent cities that we never saw before. And I think they've really drawn our attention to what's happening all across the country. So I want to thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Redwan, over to you.
Thank you, Mayor. I just have a comment in general. I don't actually have a question, but I had actually spoken to Dr. Rob Moyer from UNB. He's one of the economist professors there, and we discussed a lot about the research that's been done, and there was a lot of research done in Manitoba, and they said that there were some groups that were concerned that people would refrain themselves from working if there was a basic income. The research actually showed that it was only showing that new moms or high school students took a little bit longer to get out in the workforce. But most of the research is quite favorable for this. I think it would help our senior population. We're almost up to 20,000 here in St. John. Of course, not everybody's low income, for sure. People on disability, single people on social assistance, people making minimum wage, and it would allow people to not worry about having a basic income when they would think about starting a business. One thing that I did want to mention, and I'm just kind of throwing it out there as a question, is if there is a way for our council to leverage our partners that we have at 8 cities and the FCM.
Thank you, Councillor. That is an issue at 8 cities already. Yeah. Councillor Hickey?
Thanks very much, Your Worship, and appreciate the presentation, appreciate your local context as well. I'll do my best to not hold you being from Moncton against you. I think this is an important step and commend Councillor McKenzie for doing so. You know, we take on a lot of advocacy roles at the city, and I think this is an important one of those. I hope we don't lose sight of and continue to reflect on our need to be aggressive in challenging our status quo in City Hall so that we can do our best to make sure that we are bettering the lives consistently of folks who need it and take the steps within our ability to be able to do so, and make sure that we're giving folks the chance to take down those generational barriers that have been put in front of them. For me, that's things like we're doing tonight, having a big conversation about our changes to transit. It's about making sure, another thing we're doing tonight, taking hold of our vacant and dilapidated list so we can try and get more housing built in the community faster. Aggressively taking on affordable housing in the steps we have, like we're doing tonight. So a lot of that is reflective of how we are making sure we're taking down the barriers of poverty, and I hope we continue to try and challenge that status quo as it relates to a UBI. I think it's a clear step to address the crisis we're in, and I think it's a massive solution that I know this council is hopefully will be keen to get behind.
Councillor Sullivan.
And thanks, Your Worship. Just quickly, and I appreciate the deputy for bringing this forward. Happy to have the expert come in to help fill us in as well. And I really just want to give a shout out to one of our guests in the audience, Randy Hadfield. When I saw this, I had some questions about it and made sure I went to our local expert. So thanks, Randy, for the conversation. It was very helpful to me. And just a reminder for everybody around the table, we have our own expertise in St. John there helping lead the way as well. So thanks, Randy, and I'm certainly in favor of the motion. Thank you.
Okay, that's it. I want to thank Randy for coming this evening as well, and thank you for being here with us tonight. It's really important for us. The only comment I will make is that I do sit on the 8 cities of New Brunswick, and we have talked about it there, and I've been to the Mayor's Congress for the Atlantic Mayor's Congress, and so that's where I guess we first heard about it, or I should say I first heard about it. The terminology is different. They referred to it as BIG, which is easy for me to remember, the basic income guarantee versus the language that we've got here, the guaranteed livable basic income. So I find like sometimes the language, it can be confusing of what it actually is we're talking about. Is it one and the same? And when I read through, there was a significant amount of literature in the kit. And so when I read through the literature, it said basically those two are interchangeable with the names that they have. The other thing that's important is that we distinguish the difference between this and a living wage, which I think sometimes gets confused with this as well for the average population. And I'm assuming that this will be somewhat similar to the Guaranteed Income Supplement or the GIS that is provided for seniors based on assessment or whatever. So it's a great idea, and it's been great to have you here tonight to be able to answer any questions and to just hear some of the comments from my team here and all the literature that was provided. It's been helpful as well. So really appreciate you being here. All right, team, so I will pass it over to you. We've got a motion on the floor, so if there are any other questions for our guests, I will call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried unanimously. Thank you for being here. Good night.